Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Joey Dwyer, and we're here to talk a little baseball. We've got a couple of portal movements to discuss, Joey, whether it's coaches, players, what have you, but we'll get to that. But first, we get to our sponsor for baseball season. There will be a lot of offseason talk around baseball as well, so we'll still be giving you the lowdown on the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. That partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee, and they now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Great, obviously, time of year to go get some ice cream and do that at mpmci.com or stop in at any of your local stores. Joey, obviously the baseball season is over, but we've already got some moves to talk about. The big focus here will be the announcement of Jayson King coming over from Dayton to become Vanderbilt's hitting coach. We would assume, of course, that's. I don't even think this is an official announcement yet. Vanderbilt hasn't made it official. I don't think, but who knows when that'll happen? Kendall Rogers, of course, tweeted it out, and I think that was quicker than I think a lot of people thought, Joey. And then they also picked up a player, pitcher Cody Bowker from Georgetown, who I do want to touch on before we get to King a little bit, because Bowker is a right-handed guy that he gets into the 90s, 92, 93. I think he's got the fastball that'll chase 94, and Joe Doyle from MLB. He's a big time scout on Twitter with Major League Baseball, a top 40 prospect on his transfer portal rankings. He says he's a fast mover with budding stuff and some interesting traits that'll spark the curiosity of pro teams. It's a drop and drive operation with a reasonably low launch and a fastball that'll chase up to 94. As I said, he generates a good amount of whiffs on the heater, and he'll get some chase on the pitch as well, though he lives aggressively in the zone instead most nights. Bowker will throw a slower slider to both-handed hitters. It's been an effective pitch, although it lacks velocity and relies on command. He'll also flip over a changeup that generates considerable chase rates from lefties and a cutter to keep righties off their barrel. He will likely snag a weekend starter role at Vanderbilt. So Joe Doyle with a little scoop there. Obviously, that's just his take, his opinion on things. But Joey, we had talked about that as Vanderbilt potentially adding another or two weekend starters. We just don't know. It's so far in advance right now. But kind of looking ahead, I think we knew Vanderbilt was going to pick up a pitcher or two or three or four. I mean, you never know how many teams are going to pick up. But Cody Bowker is a really good pickup, and of course you tweeted out his numbers from last year. Pretty impressive, Joey. And I wouldn't say he's a he's a light you up type guy in the SEC that's just going to wow you with a bunch of stuff. But I think getting him and seeing that quote from Joe Doyle there, who, if you haven't read Joe Doyle's stuff, he's got great scouting reports saying he'll likely grab a weekend's starter role, Joey, is significant to me.
Yeah, to me, he has the look of a weekend guy, right? You look at the numbers, ERA of 3, 5-1 record, obviously not something that you look at super heavily, but 59-20 strikeout to walk rate as well. And I think they really unlocked him when they kind of took away the two-way tag from him. He was a two-way guy as a freshman a little bit more than he was a sophomore, really focused in on not being a two-way guy as a sophomore. I think there were some more games where he was a factor offensively his freshman year, but to me, he has the look of a guy who is going to compete for a starting role and will probably end up getting it. I think J.D. Thompson is really their only lock to be a rotation guy, and I think they really want to transform the rotation. So it'll be a lot easier to see in the spring what it's going to actually look like, but I think they really want to transform what they have in terms of their starting pitching, with them losing Bryce Cunningham, like Akara Holton as well. So we'll see, but I think that's kind of the vision that they have for him, and I think it's a really nice start to the portal. I certainly wouldn't expect them to be done, though, and I think this is kind of just the tipping point for what their offseason is going to be. It's going to look a lot different, and I think you see that on the coaching side as well.
Yeah, just the timing of it, Joey, working quickly. I know there's only been two moves to talk about, but Cody Bowker is a kid from New Hampshire. Of course, Tim Corbin resides from there, so obviously no surprise there. But another New Hampshire native that has been added to the program is Jayson King, Dayton head coach for the last 7 years. Of course, they had played a series with Vanderbilt this past year, and Joey, that was a team that was hitting the baseball that weekend. I mean,
It was one game, and they beat Vandy.
One game.
Remember that was the
Wow.
game I got in the press box.
Okay, I was thinking. Yes, I was thinking of Gonzaga. Yeah, I do. Okay, I got that whole thing mixed up with Gonzaga. I was thinking of the Gonzaga series. Dayton, yes, you're right. That was a midweek game. Vanderbilt lost. You showed up late, and Dayton mashed the baseball. I mean, Dayton came and put on a power display. And so I think Ivan Arias, of course, which is kind of unique and kind of funny there. Former Vanderbilt player from a couple years ago is now at Dayton. I wonder if he comes back. We'll see about that. But Joey, Jayson King, we don't know a ton about him. I'll admit. I mean, I've read up on him. Kendall Rogers on his initial tweet, obviously, just kind of mentioned that he's pretty popular in hitting circles, and obviously has a solid reputation with hitters. And you look at him; he's an older guy, right? He's not a Mike Baxter type where he's a younger former player. Jayson King has been in this game for a long time, and he's been the head coach. I think that's a big thing there, head coach. He was a Power 5 head coach that Vanderbilt picked up, and I don't think we can forget that or should forget that. Since 2018 at Dayton, the Flyers led the A10 in on-base percentage and OPS, and they were third in home runs this past season. 2 position players were drafted from Dayton in 2021. And so they've had some talent, Joey. Now that, this isn't a Southern Miss type program, maybe, or a Coastal Carolina, but, Dayton has a solid reputation, especially within the conference they are in. And like you mentioned, they came and beat Vanderbilt in a February midweek, this past year. And he's got history with Corbin, you would assume, right? He coached at UMass Boston, which is a D3 school. Of course, Corbin was obviously up there at Presbyterian and picking up Jacob Humphrey from UMass Lowell. So there's connections all over the place. He also coached at a D2 school, Franklin Pierce, and also a stint at Army. So he's been in a lot of places, Joey, and I think that's something to to be impressed with and not scoff at, because with all due respect, Mike Baxter, he was a former player. He was a 4-year big leaguer. And he wasn't a hire that was outside the box, or kind of went up through the ranks with Vanderbilt baseball with Tim Corbin, and obviously earned it. I mean, I'm not trying to downgrade that hire, but you look at this, Joey, and maybe a little bit more conventional, and not normal, but I mean this was a solid hire. And again, we still have to learn a lot about him. But I think the premise of this is that Vanderbilt made a change, and they got a guy fairly quickly, and they're able to recruit and try to draw portal players, and especially high schoolers, and start to change the approach, because that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think change was needed, and I think it was needed in terms of what they taught and what they did in terms of development. And I think that was probably the biggest thing, and I think it will change. I think King is a lot different than Mike Baxter is, and that's not necessarily for better or for worse, but I think he's older school. I think he is a guy who's a lot more intense than Baxter was, and that can be a good or a bad thing. I think he kind of reminds me of maybe a little less intense version of Jerry Hill. And obviously, Tim Corbin doesn't need that voice in his ear like Clark Lee does, but I think having a head coach on staff is going to be something that's pretty valuable for them. And it also shows you how kind of valuable people view the Vanderbilt jobs as. Guy leaves an A10 head coaching job that he's been at for 7 years to come to Vanderbilt. But I think they're going to change a lot of things. I think they're going to change maybe what they teach to an extent, maybe some of their development philosophy. I think they're going to need to pair him with a younger guy who's maybe more a rising star type. So it's not just a staff of old school guys, which it feels like King is. I think him and Corbin, it has the looks of him and Corbin having a long-standing relationship, and that's kind of how they got to this point. It felt like it was almost a no-brainer once Corbin moved on from Baxter to hire King. So it's interesting in that aspect, but I think they needed a change, and Corbin seems to think very highly of King by the looks of it. And obviously, they came into Vanderbilt and won, and he had a losing record throughout his time at Dayton, but was pretty good in A-10 play. And if you're looking at it, you don't have to be an awesome head coach to be an awesome assistant. I think he was a pretty solid head coach if he was able to stay there for 7 years. So I think that's kind of my takeaway from it. It shows you how appealing the job was. It shows you that there's change on the horizon in multiple ways, and it shows you that they're going to maybe have a little bit of a different identity offensively. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like and exactly what they're recruiting like, but I think he's really going to help him on the hitting side. He's a guy that Kendall Rogers, again, tweeted, has had a pretty solid reputation as a hitting development guy. I've heard some things about his recruiting ability that have been positive. So we'll see. I think for better or for worse, though, the hitting side's going to have a lot different of a look, and they've got to hire one more assistant. But make some news when you hire sitting head coach. So Vanderbilt, I think the jury's still out on this one, but from the looks of it, it's one that Tim Corbin probably feels pretty good about.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at Dayton's numbers last year offensively, only 65 home runs as a team. So, again, that is what it is. If you want to be concerned about it as a Vanderbilt fan, feel free to. But, I don't know that really it carries a ton of weight. Now, you look at the body of work. I haven't looked at the last 7 years. If you were to combine them, I haven't gone that deep. But last year, I think just in terms of OPS, Joey, and getting on base, I mean, the simple fact of getting on base. I mean, Vanderbilt didn't do that enough. I mean, they didn't get on base enough. They didn't walk enough. Their approach was not good enough. And, so obviously power is an aspect of that. But I think you're going to see in Omaha, Joey, again, that the approach can't be lifting the baseball. Now, it could be wrong. It could be proven wrong in Omaha, and it's just a power outage that we've never seen before. But you've got to piece hits together. You got to hit the gaps. You got to bunt. You got to walk. You got to steal bases. It's more than just the long ball. It really is. And I know it's easy to say Vanderbilt has obviously lacked power, and that has been a huge factor, into how and why they've struggled. But there's so many other factors, like you mentioned. I think last time we got on here, Joey, it's not just the power output. Last year, Dayton had one guy with double-digit home runs. And that guy is actually Eddie Yamin, 6'5", 205, native of New York. So, Northeast guy. He'll be a junior next year. Infielder, catcher. Gotta wonder, Joey. I would not be surprised if a couple of Dayton players come over. I really wouldn't. And Yamin, I think I'm pronouncing that name right. Last year, hit 342, 13 home runs, 54 RBIs. That'd be a great pickup. And then looking at some other guys. Obviously, Ivan Arias is a former Vanderbilt Commodore, and then you look at David Mendez, 5'11", 186. He'll be a sophomore next year. He hit 342. So they did have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys hitting over 300. So honestly, statistically, not a whole lot different from Vanderbilt this past year. But the OPS and the on-base percentage, I think, are what you look at there with what he did last year with Dayton, and even in the 7 years, 6 years prior. So he's an experienced guy, and I'm with you, Joey. Vanderbilt needed a change. I think we all knew that. And the fact that they did work quickly, I don't think Corbin got a lot of no's here. And maybe he said, I'm getting King. That's my guy. Let's roll. Who knows? We don't know what went down and how it happened. But I think Jayson King, bringing him in, is a sign that, number one, Corbin is going to make changes. He's not going to ride out. And you mentioned that. You made a lot of really good points in our post game there after they lost to High Point. You said they can't just roll with this same look, this same approach, the same players, the same coaches. Similar to football last year. You can't just you're physically not able to ride this out the way it's going. So you had to make changes. And I think this is a good sign that Corbin has made a decision to change. And I think that means he'll be here for I say good bit. I don't know, but I mean, this certainly doesn't mean he's leaving anytime soon or wants to leave or wants to get out of the game. So that's a broader point there. But Joey, Jayson King is, like you said, they do need to pair him with a younger guy, I think. I know Ro Coleman is on the staff there. We'll see and he actually coached first base. Forget which game, but I think it was game 3 against Georgia. I think coached first base. So who knows? Maybe I would expect another coach to be brought in, of course, but how they do that, how they shift those roles around, who knows? But Joey, I look at the experience for King. I look at the change of approach. Again, I don't know too much about his approach. We'll probably try to look more into that. But just the experience. He's going to come in here with a wealth of knowledge, and that is exactly what these bats need. And he can also bring in, hopefully, talented portal bats specifically for this team.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say on him, I think it's interesting to look at Dayton's kind of track record. I'm glad you brought up their offense from this year. This was one of their better years under him, so I don't think it was a Mike White at Florida situation where you're running to another job so you don't get fired at your current job, right? I think it's that he genuinely thought this was the best move for him. So that kind of tells you where he was at and how appealing this kind of was to him and how his relationship with Corbin had developed. So I think there's a lot of respect there between the two. And I think when Tim Corbin respects somebody like that enough to hire him pretty quickly, I think you listen regardless of what you've heard otherwise. But I think he's going to be a lot different than Mike Baxter, and we'll see how that works out. But that's kind of my take on it, is that it's going to be a lot different, and I think this program at this point kind of needed different.
Absolutely. Vanderbilt hires Jayson King for their vacant hitting coach position. Again, the source here is Kendall Rogers. This move hasn't been made official. But again, that is what is going on and what has happened here in the last week for Vanderbilt baseball. Jayson King is headed to Vanderbilt from Dayton. Also, Cody Bowker picked up from Georgetown, and there will be other transfer portal players added, whether they're pitchers, hitters, whatever. But we are keeping you up to date on our board with a great transfer portal tracker for baseball. So take a look at that. I'm sure there'll be more action throughout this week, and of course, as the College World Series ends, obviously you'll see it ramp up a little bit. But that's what's going on with Vanderbilt baseball. Thanks for checking out this episode of Vandy Sports Podcast. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick, and we will see you next time.